Hi, I'm Jay Andrews with Laguna Tools. Today, we're going to talk about the new Bandit 4 Edgebander. This is the perfect machine for small shops that are doing thin edge banding from 0.4 all the way up through 3mm product. This has got top and bottom, front and rear edge trimming, as well as scraping and buffing so you can do 3mm product. If you're looking for corner rounding and for pre-milling, we have the Bandit 5 that we've covered in a different video. This will handle the needs for most shops. We're going to walk through and have a look at each of the stations, and then finally we're going to run some products so you can see it operate. Now up here at the infeed side of the machine, we've got the control cabinet. The nice part about this is it's on a swivel, and you can unlock it and swivel it from the side where you're doing the setup all the way over to the far side here where you're operating the machine and feeding the machine. And once you've got it in position, you can go through and lock it. We're going to leave it on this side while we're doing the video, and then we'll flip it around when we're running panels. Next up is the tape tray. The tape tray is on a swivel, and it's a large diameter tape tray that'll hold a lot of material. Now stepping around here to the infeed side of the machine, we've got a few components back here to have a look at. One of them is up on top, and this is actually the mechanism that sets the thickness of your panels. So if you're going to run 3/4 inch panel, you're going to set this at 19mm. There's a crank on the front that raises and lowers it through the jack shaft and through the gearbox. Now there's two other small devices here that might be easily overlooked. One of them is the heated infeed fence, and this preheats the edge of your panel as you're feeding it through. And that gives you a better glue application into the edge of the panel. And finally, underneath this little cover, you're going to see that there's a feed limiting device, and this prevents you from feeding panels too fast and causing the machine to foul up. As you feed your panel through, it'll drop down, it'll raise back up when you're ready to feed the next panel through. Moving up to the first station of the machine, we're going to see the glue pot. It's a hot melt glue pot that takes pelletized glue. Those simply go right in there, and that stays covered. It goes up through a feed mechanism up here into the glue application station, and that's the first element that your panel is going to hit as it's being fed through the machine. As we mentioned, the tape goes up on the tray and it feeds through the machine. The first step that it encounters is this spring-loaded tension mechanism that keeps the tension on the tape. There's a small gate right here that keeps the tape from rising up. And then it goes through a rough trim guillotine. The rough trim guillotine will trim the rear edge of the tape so that it overhangs the panel, and they're going to get final trim on the inside. The tape is going to round the corner, and there's a large diameter driven wheel. It's driven off of a drive shaft, and this rotates when the glue pot is being agitated and stirred. Next up, there's a series of pressure rollers. There's 3 pressure rollers that are pneumatically controlled, and these have got pressure, and that pushes the tape right into the edge of the panel to make sure that you've got good adhesion. Each of the pneumatic elements on the top has a control at the bottom so that it can be precisely set. There's a gauge and an adjustment valve for each. Now moving down, we're going to open up the inside cabinet and have a look at the other elements. Now the first thing that you'll notice is that the inside of the cabinet has got sound dampening, and that helps to keep the sound down in your shop while you've got all the mechanisms running. You'll notice that there's easy airlift cylinders to help lift the door up and out of the way. Now one of the first things that you'll see inside the cabinet makes your maintenance a breeze, and it's centralized automatic lubrication. The controller is going to lubricate the machine through these hoses to each of the stations as the machine is operating. The other thing is one of these remote switches, and this can turn on and off the feed belt so that your operator can go through and set the adjustments on the machine without having to step back up to the front and back. And this can be moved up and down the length of the machine and then stored out of the way when not in use. The first station on the inside is the front and rear edge trimming station, and you'll see that there's 2 different high frequency motors, and each of them has a carbide tip saw blade, and that's going to trim the front and rear edge of the tape as the panel is being fed through the machine. The front and rear trim station is solidly mounted on this big casting. The slide mechanism is also solid steel, and you'll see that the motors can be controlled independently and raise up and down. I'm going to switch these on, and you can watch it rise up and come into position. The next station on the inside of the machine is the top and bottom trimming station. Now this uses shaper cutters to trim the top and bottom of the tape. You will want to select tape that is wider than your panel so that it actually overhangs and doesn't have a gap. It'll go through and pick up these shaper cutters on the inside that will trim that flush with the edge of the panel. There are two copy pads or copy tracer wheels that will follow the thickness of the panel, so if there's any deviation at all, those will pick it up and give you a perfect edge every time. If the panel moves in or out at all, this is a floating head and it'll actually follow the edge of the panel. This is the top cutter, this is the bottom cutter, and these are controlled through high frequency motors. Now, setting up a lesser machine can be quite challenging, but we've made it really easy on the Bandit 4. We've got the numeric counters here for the trim station, and you just set that for the thickness of your tape. So if you're running 1mm tape, you're going to set it to 1mm, and it makes the initial setup very quick and easy. Now, as your panel goes through and gets the top and bottom trim with the shaper cutters, there can be some fine little mill marks as that cutter is going over the panel. And to remove those, we use a scraper. It's like a cabinet scraper, and as your panel slides through, it'll pick up the scraper on the inside. It's a carbide scraper, and it also has the copy pads that can accommodate the different thickness of panel. It is also a floating head that floats in and out, just like the top and bottom trimmer is. There's a lot of great details inside the Bandit 4 Edgebander, and one of them is the dust collection. We've got dust collection for the top and bottom trimming, and there's a special one for the scraping station. As that panel is being scraped, it can produce long strings, and those can be collected right up here in this collection box so they don't get sucked into your dust collector. Now that the panel has had the ends trimmed and the top and bottom trimmed and scraped, there's a small blower right here that blows off debris to keep the edge of that panel nice and clean as it's almost finished with the process. That's located right behind the scraping station. And while we're inside the cabinet, you're going to see that there's a big beefy structure right here that is part of the lift mechanism. To lift the panel feed up and down, there's a jack shaft right here and a large gearbox that lifts the entire mechanism up and down very smoothly. Now we're at the outfeed end of the machine outside the cabinet, and you're going to see that there's a lift motor here. And this actually has a little gearbox that rotates the jack shaft that can lift the rear section up for the feeder, and that will set your panel thickness. We saw the front section at the front of the machine, and this just happens to be the back of that drive shaft. Going down a little bit further, we're going to see that we've got twin buffing stations here, and this is a top and bottom buffing station. That'll polish the edge of that panel up and polish the edge of the tape to make sure that your panel is perfect as it exits the machine. And finally, you'll see that there's a large 3 horsepower motor at the exit of the machine. It drives a gearbox which drives the tractor feed that feeds the panels through the machine. And finally, you'll see that there's a couple of other little details at the back. You're going to see that there's an emergency stop switch that you can push at any point in time. If you have a panel, for example, that gets cocked sideways, you can hit that stop switch and shut it off at the back of the machine or at the front. And finally, there's this little extension, and as your panel is exiting the machine and wants to tip down, this will keep it from falling out on the floor if you're not at this end of the machine. Now back up at the infeed side of the machine, you'll see that the controller is pretty logical and very easy to operate. You'll see that everything is well labeled, and it's just a simple touch screen that operates the track or any of the elements in the machine. I've gone ahead and installed some PVC tape into the machine and just simply threaded it through up to the guillotine section. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the glue agitator, start the feed mechanism running, and then I'll go through and turn on the individual elements. And let's go ahead and run some panels through the machine. You'll get a chance to watch each station do its job as the panel is feeding through. Well, now that we watched the machine run through in a single pass, we're going to go through and run multiple panels through at a time. I'm going to go ahead and step up the speed a little bit, and we'll feed a couple panels through rapid fire. Well, that looks perfect. Let's go ahead and shut off the machine and have a closer look at the panel. Boy, this panel looks fantastic. I don't know how well it comes out on the camera, but it is really clean both on the top and bottom as well as the corner. Now today we're using the white PVC on melamine. You can also use different veneers, and you can also go through and lay in wood tape to plywood or a variety of different substrate materials. Man, this panel I'm blown away by the quality of the finish that the Bandit 4 delivers. Now, to get the best quality out of your edge banding machine, you need to have a good quality edge on your panel. And the way that you get that is through a table saw with scoring, a sliding panel saw perhaps, or even a CNC machine for the best results. If you need a panel saw or a CNC machine, you can give us a call. We can help you out with those machines as well. Now, if you've got any questions on the Edgebander at all or any of our products, you can look at our website at lagunatools.com, or you can give us a call toll-free at 800-234-1976. And don't forget to go over to our YouTube channel and hit subscribe so that you can stay in tune with all of our machines.